Hi, welcome to Anvil's live webinar. My name is Brett Meyers. I'm the paid media strategist here. I've worked in digital marketing for about 10 years. And today's webinar, I'm going to be talking about two things, Magic 8 Ball, which you are probably all familiar with, and Google Analytics. So you might be wondering what a Magic 8 Ball has to do with Google Analytics, considering that Google Analytics is a comprehensive tracking software that lets you understand all the behavior of visitors to your site, and a Magic 8 Ball is a toy. So the key thing these two very different things have in common is that their primary purpose, the number one thing they exist for, is simply to answer questions. And so, if you were to open up a Magic 8 Ball and the little die that shows you the answers and you spread it all out, you would see this. You would see a lot of answers. They don't really have any reference to anything. They're not useful to you at all. They're just spread out and they look like a mess. And the problem is a lot of times when people go into Google Analytics, they see something a lot like this. There's a ton of data. Don't know where to begin. Don't know what it's relevant to or where to start or what to do with it. And essentially what you get is information overload. So the first step to using Google Analytics before you even open the program is first, just like with the Magic 8 Ball, ask a question. Don't even open the browser until you have a question in mind. And so what do those questions look like? A lot of times when people use Google Analytics, they ask questions like, what is the bounce rate on my site? How much time do people spend on my site? What is the conversion rate on my site? Or maybe how many new users are visiting my site? But there's a problem with all these questions. And that problem is that these questions are misleading. And a misleading question is problematic because essentially these all lead to more questions. If you're asking what's the bounce rate on my site and you find out, the next question is, well, what's a good bounce rate? How much time should people be spending on my site? What's a successful conversion rate? Or should I have more new users coming to my site? You're left with more questions than you are with answers. And the problem is that a lot of times people are using Google Analytics to compare themselves to industry averages. They're basically asking, how do I measure up with the competition? But the problem with industry averages is that if you are comparing yourself to what the average is, it's not really telling you how to make it any better. And even if you are above industry averages, it's not telling you, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't make your site even better beyond what you're already at. Google Analytics is not a measuring stick. What it is a Magic 8 Ball. Because the first rule of Google Analytics Club is don't ask questions without context. Asking a question in Google Analytics without context is kind of like asking the Magic 8 Ball, will the next answer be yes? Well, maybe. So the first rule of using Google Analytics is essentially ask a purposeful question. A purposeful question looks something like this. What are my site's pain points that lead to exits? How is my new landing page performing? How do new visitors interact with my site? How are repeat visitors engaging with new content? And maybe what's causing the high cart abandonment during checkout? Once you have a purposeful question, the next step is knowing where to find the answers to these questions. And I'm going to walk you through that process. So you're probably all familiar with the 5 W's of journalism: who, what, when, where, and why. But in Google Analytics, I like to think there's 4 W's of analytics. That's who are my best customers, where are they coming from, which path do they take, and what do they want? And the answers to these 4 questions in analytics are generally found in the AABCs of analytics: audience, acquisition, behavior, and conversions. And more often than not, these questions can correlate very well with these 4 top-level tiers and reports of analytics. And we're going to go through each of these and kind of highlight the key reports that you want to look at when you're asking these type of questions. So the first one is, who are my best customers? The audience tab is going to tell you who's coming to your site, who is engaging with it the most, and essentially who you should be marketing to and creating content for. When you start to look into these reports, you might learn stuff like, let's say that 35 to 44-year-olds have the lowest bounce rate. You might find that men make larger purchases than women on your site. You might find that 20% of your visitors are bargain hunters and value shoppers, or that 12% are in the market for home decor. You might find in the geo reports that 15% speak Spanish, and that maybe 40% are from the West Coast, and 20% of those are from California. You might find that returning visitors spend twice as long on the site, and that 70% of purchases return within 7 days. And you might find, surprisingly, even though this blows my mind, that 35% of your users still use IE, or that 25% are on mobile phones. So right here, just glancing at some of these demographics and geos and interests and the technology they're using, you can start to paint a picture about who your primary users are and what behavior they take on your site. And this is going to be really useful for how you market to them, both outside of your site and internally. The next step is, where are they coming from? And in the acquisition report, you're going to find various levels of all the traffic coming into your site. So at a top level, you can go to all traffic and find a breakdown of all the different channels and how they compare to each other. The basic ones: direct, people who typed in your address, your paid search, your organic search, paid links from other sites, organic links from other sites, all of your social channels, any email blast or order confirmation type of emails you're sending out, and then the dreaded other. And we're going to get into the other in a minute, but hopefully you have very little, if no other, if you're tracking all your campaigns correctly. If you drill down a little bit more, you can get into more specific details about these. What are the paid keywords? What are the organic keywords? How do the social channels compare to each other? And then you have campaigns, which is any other tracked links that you have control of. Pretty much everything other than AdWords and organic search and direct should have some tracking with campaigns. So when I say any other tracked links, what I actually mean is all trackable links. If you're not utilizing campaign tracking, you're really leaving a lot of data out there that can help you understand how your marketing efforts are working and how are they interacting with different types of visitors and different types of landing pages, different content, etc. So there's 4 key elements to campaigns. Campaign name, which should be the same across all the channels. You don't want to do summer sales 17 Facebook, summer sales 17. The point of a campaign name is to be able to compare it across different methodologies, different sources, different mediums, like if you want to compare how your banners are doing to your newsletters, and different creative. There's really no excuse not to use this, because Google makes it impossibly easy to create campaign tracking on all of your URLs. You basically just need to go to, you can actually just Google URL builder, and the first result will be this URL here, gadevtools@appspot.com, campaign URL builder. And essentially you'll plug in the landing page URL you want to use. You'll plug in your campaign source, your medium, and your name, and your content. And as long as you're consistent with how you're using this structure, what you're going to be able to do with this is when people visit your site, you're going to be able to compare previous campaigns at a top level. So you can see how this year's summer sale did with last year's, or how compared to the Labor Day sale, or how compared to, say, a new product campaign you were running at the same time. You can compare campaign performance by each channel to see if social was bringing more conversions, or if paid, or even your organic referral links. And you can compare different formats. You can see, again, how emails are doing versus an organic Facebook post. And finally, you can compare ad or messaging variations. And I'm going to show you some examples of those as we get deeper into this. But first, the next step is looking at what path they take. And in the behavior reports, there's a lot of information in here that may only be relevant to some websites and some apps. But the 3 key ones that I want to point out here that should be useful to just about everyone are site content, site search, and events. Now, site content is where you're going to look to find things like, what homepage content do visitors respond to? How do visitors find what they're looking for? Which pages do they visit before purchasing or leaving? And there's one key report that I really love. It's my favorite thing, and I think it's the most underutilized report in analytics. It's called the navigation summary. So if you go into behavior and you drill down into site content and click on all pages, and even if you want to start from a specific page, click on that page, and you'll see this tab up at the top, Explore Navigation Summary. If you click on Navigation Summary, what this is going to show you is all the pages that people clicked on after they visited the page that you're currently viewing. And it'll also show you how many people left from that page. And this is really useful because I find so many times that people, if you have created your site, or if you are responsible for the content on your site, you know how it works. You could run through it blindfolded and it all works perfectly, and you don't understand why anyone ever has an issue with it. But what this does is it gives you a perspective of the actual users who are using the site, who don't automatically know where to click to find the next page they want to go to. And so you can start to see in here when people go back a page and keep trying to find something, you can see where they exit, and you can start to segment based on those different demographics and different campaign sources, which we'll get into in a little bit. But I strongly recommend that you go through and click through and try to see like where people are getting stuck using the navigation summary, and then go try to use your site again, kind of through their eyes, and see maybe what they're seeing. It's about the most useful thing short of usability testing or a heat map that you can really understand how people are using the full scope of your site. Two other elements I want to point out in the behavior tab are site search. Site search is really important, especially for e-commerce sites, but even for informational sort of service sites, because visitors are telling you two things. They're telling you what they want to find on your site. And this could be a product that you might want to carry that people are showing a strong interest in. But even more importantly, it's going to show you what visitors are struggling to find on your site. So if someone's looking for a certain product and they're searching for it, that means they may not, especially if they're exiting after doing a search, that means they may not be finding that product, which may be an issue with how you're naming it or how you're labeling it, or just that it's kind of hidden or buried. The third element I want to point out in the behavior tab is events. Now, events take a little bit of setup to really get the most out of them. But it's actually fairly easy if you use Google Tag Manager to set up events. And it's basically going to show you how visitors interact with content. So this can be a variety of things. You can find out how much of a video is watched. You can find out which homepage ads visitors are clicking on, or how many slides in a slideshow are getting clicked through. Or if you have any tools or interactive content on your site, you can find out from events not only how visitors are using that, but how much interaction with that tool is creating better conversion rates, or higher average order values, or more engagement. So setting up events, it's a little bit more than we can fit into this presentation, but it's definitely something that if you take the time to kind of research how to implement GTM and set up some events and start tagging the different interactions with your site, from just rotator clicks to video plays to everything, you're going to have a lot more data to look at about how people are interacting beyond just clicking from page to page. The fourth key element in the AABCs of analytics is conversions. And this is essentially just, what do your customers want? There's two core elements depending on what your site's purpose is and what it's providing. But essentially, you have goals, email signups, form fills, where to buy clicks to find your product in stores. Or if you're selling products online in e-commerce, you're going to be able to see what products they're purchasing and what quantity, what products are purchased together, and start to get an idea of how to present those products to the customers to increase average order value, to help them find what they're looking for. And the second element of conversions is simply looking at the full picture of the conversion funnel. So you can look at what combination of channels created a final conversion, look at which channels started that whole process, gave that first impression of your brand that eventually led to conversion, how long that takes, and how many times they had to interact with your site from different channels before making a conversion. And then finally, attribution is very similar, but this is just going to show you different models to determine the impact of your marketing efforts. For example, if you're seeing a high percentage of direct traffic is turning into conversions, you might want to look at some different attribution models like time decay, because I guarantee you that people aren't just waking up in the morning and just typing in your brand for the first time, going to your URL and making a purchase. It's very likely that they had multiple touch points from different channels, and attribution helps you understand the impact of all those together in a bigger picture sort of way. So once you know where to find the answer, you've asked a purposeful question, you know what report to start to dig down to find the answer to that question. The next step is to really keep digging until you have a clear action. So it's not good enough if you know, say, 35 to 44% or 35 to 44-year-old visitors are some of your most engaged users. You don't know why. You don't have anything to do with that. That's just information. It doesn't lend itself to taking action that's going to improve your website. So the second rule of Google Analytics Club is don't be content with a vague answer. Stopping at a vague answer is kind of like asking the magic 8-ball, what should I do now? Well, you should try again. What you need to be doing after you kind of get into these interesting nuggets of information, things that stand out about your data, is start to ask follow-up questions. So let's say you find you have a high bounce rate from referral traffic. Well, what sites are those visitors coming from? What landing pages are they landing on that they are disappointed in and leaving from? If you find that visitors are using site search at a high rate, you can find out what terms they're searching for and what pages they're landing on that they are performing a search from. You can look and see, are there any age or regional differences? For example, are people in the UK looking for something different or searching for a different term than people in the US? And let's say one demographic is converting much higher than other demographics. We can use Google Analytics to determine why that is. Find out where they're coming from, what channels are driving that demographic, what content on the site or in your ads are leading them to purchase, and what are they purchasing? And this information, these sorts of questions lead to actionable items. You can kind of determine like how, if you find out what a certain demographic is responding to, you can incorporate that in your ads or in your Facebook posts. You can create a different rotator or a landing page to better highlight those items. So your customers are telling you through their behavior what they expect, what they want, where they're getting caught up. And digging down to this level will show you how to better change your site to eliminate obstacles and increase their conversion and how much they're ordering or whatever the purpose of your site is. The way you answer these deeper follow-up questions is through segments and dimensions. Virtually any of the AABCs, the audience acquisition, behavior, and conversions, can be cross-referenced with one another. So you can look at geographic by acquisition channel, site behavior by gender, site search by new versus returning. I could list several slides of all the different combinations that you could put together, but it's really a matter of taking that little nugget of information that stands out and start to compare it from different angles. So we'll take a few examples. We can look at just based on age groups. We can see that in this account, 35 to 44-year-olds responded really well to this lightweight ad. They had a very low bounce rate, much higher than the average bounce rate. They viewed more pages and spent more time on the site. So we know 35 to 44-year-olds, something about this ad increased their engagement on the site. Whereas the ad up here, because a little bit closer to the average and maybe not something we want to use for them again. On the flip side, we found that same graphic did not do so well with 18 to 24-year-olds. So we can, armed with this information, the next campaigns we make, we can look at the differences between those graphics and target them differently based on those age groups. Another example with age groups, you can look at locations. We find that, wow, a lot of people in Portland in the 25 to 34-year-old range responded really well. They went very deep in the site, spent a lot of time on there. And so we can target more funds on Portland in our next campaign, or do something, a special landing page or a special post targeting that location, and to see if we can get more out of that. Another way to look at age groups would be based on how they're viewing your site. So here we see that even though there's a pretty even split between 18 and 24-year-olds, between mobile and desktop tablet traffic, that a lot more new people in that age group are coming in from mobile or from desktop. And we also see a much higher percentage of 35 to 44-year-olds are also coming in from tablet and desktop. So how we how we market those, forgive me, we can use this information to better maximize the budget we're spending on any campaigns. Finally, another way to look at this, again, I mentioned the navigation summary. This is a screenshot of a navigation summary where I've segmented it by new users and returning users. This is why I think one of the most useful things you can do is to compare how new visitors use your site versus people who have been there before. So right at the bat, we see that returning users are much more likely to go right into the store and right into the categories, and that are much less likely to kind of get into the about us and get into the sort of like informational stuff. Whereas new users are responding to that. So that can inform how you set up your homepage and what you highlight to target new visitors versus returning users. And the more you dig into this, the more you're going to see where, say, a new person hasn't figured out how to, navigate, say, your shopping cart, whereas returning users worked out the kinks, and maybe they're responding well, but you need to do something to help new visitors become returning visitors and returning customers. So once you've dug and you found this point where you have a clear action, you're just like, I know I can do something with this. The next step is simply to form a hypothesis based on that data. And really what this means is you can stop asking these questions and start answering them. So if we look at, say, some of these, there's some of the same questions we focused on, some of the same purposeful questions we looked at earlier. So what are my site's pain points that lead to exits? Well, you might find that based on site search data, visitors seem to have trouble finding X product and they leave. Okay, well, this is something you can form a hypothesis on. What if I better label this product, or create an ad for it, or put it in a different category, or label it differently, do something to make it so people aren't having trouble finding this product. We could look at, how I just created this landing page. How's it working? Well, maybe women ages 25 to 35 really like it, but men are bouncing at a high rate. Okay, that's useful. That means that maybe I need to try sending men to a different landing page that uses different messaging or different graphics or contains different content. If you look at how do my new visitors interact with my site, well, maybe they don't interact that much with homepage content and they go straight to search. Again, that may be just because they're not seeing what they're expecting to find there, and you may want to play around with your homepage content. And that's especially true if the repeat visitors are only responding to sale ads, but otherwise they'll go straight to the category pages and just make a purchase, and they don't need to see any of the new products or whatever you're showing in your homepage. And then finally, if you find that all of your visitors are getting stuck on the shipping information page and exiting and not completing a purchase or completing a conversion, you're probably going to want to fix the shipping page and make it a little bit more usable. So essentially, we've taken these high-level questions, we've dug down to try to find the answers, and kept digging until we have a clear idea, and we formed a hypothesis on how we can change that, or capitalize on a positive trend that we're seeing in the analytics, whether it's from a demographic or from an acquisition channel, or just in how all people use certain elements of the site. The final step of using, well, not the final, but pretty much the final step of using Google Analytics is to test your theory. And when I say test your theory, I really mean test your theory. Don't just make a change and assume everything's fixed and it can just move on and everything's golden. It's really important that you do some sort of test, whether it's an A/B test or just for a period of time making a change, doing something where you can measure the impact on that, whatever data you found that you're trying to change or increase or improve. You want to see if whatever you're changing on the site is actually working. Because if you test your theory, you can return to step one and ask the question, did my change have an impact? Did it have a negative impact on someone I wasn't, didn't mean to make an impact on, or did it make a unintended positive impact that I wasn't anticipating, but I can also use to my benefit to continue bettering the site and making my site more usable, more engaging, and more profitable. So that's all I have for the presentation. If you have any questions, please tweet at Anvil Media or Paper Cliche, or just hit us up with the hashtag AskAnvil. We'll kind of look at some of those questions and try to answer them as much as we can in this webinar. If you have deeper questions, just go ahead and get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to work with you on some of those projects.